Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Um, in this video, I wanted to talk about it's a pretty important issue that I think. I feel like I this video is basically about why I believe so many Muslim parents have failed. Why so many of them have failed to raise good Muslim children. So parenthood is supposed to be, you're supposed to be mentors, you're supposed to be the first teachers, you're supposed to be the first line of protection for your kids. There is no other institution that can replicate this. Children cannot learn certain things if their parents aren't there for them, if their parents aren't there to teach them about this. Children cannot learn certain things if their parents just don't teach them about it. A child's development must include Islam. If you are Muslim, if you're a Muslim parent, your children, their development, it has to include Islam. And I honestly believe many Muslim parents have failed their children. They've raised their kids to be, whitewashed, liberalized, irreligious, and secular. To be more specific, what I mean is that these parents have children, these Muslim parents have children who have boyfriends and girlfriends, who drink alcohol, who smoke, who have tattoos, who marry outside their faith, and give their kids Western names because they're so whitewashed, who don't raise their kids according to Islam, who don't pray, who don't read Quran, who don't fast, who wear tight and short and revealing clothes, who go to bars and nightclubs and mixed gender college parties and work parties where people are drunk and high on drugs and dancing. The list continues by by me saying these kids of Muslim parents, they celebrate non-Muslim holidays. They participate in the customs of other religions. They put other religions over their own Islamic religion. They don't care about their fellow Muslims' spiritual well-being. Right? Nothing is all of these sins that I mentioned. The Muslim parents, they basically lay out they lay out the welcome mat for these sins for their kids to commit. Nothing is more shameful and embarrassing than seeing Muslims not knowing the basics of Islam, and it's because their parents never taught them. So how does it come to this? Well, one reason is that this one is kind of obvious, I guess. Many Muslim parents are toxic. They're abusive and controlling. They don't show any love or support to their kids. And then the kids of these Muslim parents, they become rebellious. They might leave Islam. And these parents fail to realize that they were the problem. And then there's some parents who are very selective in how they raise their kids. So, for example, they'll restrict their daughters while they let their sons do whatever they want to. It's because of backwards cultural reasons of honor and shame that daughters' lives are heavily restricted while sons, are free to do whatever they feel like. And then there's also something else. There's Muslim parents who already come from secular and liberal Muslim countries. Many Arab countries, many Muslim African countries, many Muslim countries in Central Asia, and Muslim countries in Europe. They're already secular and irreligious, many of them. I've mentioned this before. Previously, it's due to forced secularism brought on by colonialism of. Sorry, it's brought on by um, the forced secularism. It's brought by European colonialism, and as well, there's forced atheism that's due to Soviet influence. So when Muslims from these places immigrate to the West, nothing really changes. They continue to live their liberal and secular lifestyles. But you know what? Putting abusive parents and selective parents and Muslim parents who are already secularized, putting them aside, I want to talk about a sad phenomenon in the West among Muslim parents, more specifically those who, come from religious backgrounds, not necessarily as immigrants, but, good religious communities in the West. All of the sins that I mentioned earlier, it's unfortunately common to see these kinds of Muslim um, committed by the offspring of Muslim parents. And it's due to quite a few reasons, and I will go through them in what I think is in order. So, first things first, these Muslim parents, they didn't teach their kids Islam. And it goes for, regular Muslim parents and religious Muslim parents. So let me expand a bit more on here. By religious Muslim parents, I mean, Muslim parents who are heavily invested, in Islam. So let me give you an example of this. There's religious Muslim parents that they're too concerned with their own akhirah. They're too concerned with their own afterlife and spirituality to teach their kids. Okay, I know of a sheikh at my local masjid. Okay, he's very active in the masjid. He's very active in the community, the Muslim community. I know his wife. She wears a niqab. She's also pretty active in the community. Both of their kids, they have a son and a daughter. They both married non-Muslims. I've seen them, and you know what? They can't even qualify as Muslim the way that they behave. I also know of another Muslim leader at another masjid. I don't know what his title is, but I know that he's very active in the masjid and in the community, and he's very knowledgeable about Islam. He has weekly lectures at the masjid. I've seen his own kids, and same thing. They really they can't qualify as Muslim. I've seen the way his daughter dresses and how she behaves in public. I've seen his son. I've seen how he behaves in public and how he dresses and how he appears. It's because some Muslim parents, they're too concerned with their own, with their own spirituality. They don't bother to teach their kids. They don't bother to check up on their kids. And then there's some Muslim parents who are too concerned with their own status and image in the community to care about their kids. Okay, they're concerned about everyone knowing who they are and what they do. They put this greed, this level of greed above religion, so above Islam. This rubs off on kids, on your own kids, if you're like this. Your kids are also going to want to show off who they are. They're also going to kick religion to the side. I can't tell you how many uncles and aunties I've seen in my own community who give so much importance to what they do and who they are. They want to be in the spotlight all the time. their kids see this and they want to do the same. They want to be the exact same. They want the exact same lifestyle. And then the next example is there's Muslim parents who think that Islam is innately built into their kids because they themselves come from Muslim cultures and Muslim backgrounds. These Muslim parents, they think Islam is programmed into their kids at birth. So that means they don't really have to do anything. They don't have to teach their kids Islam. They don't have to, teach them what is right and wrong. And then at the same time, they expect their kids to be good Muslims. These kids grow up westernized and their parents are left scratching their heads as, to where they went wrong. Parents, these Muslim parents that I'm talking about in this video, they want the best schools for their kids. They want the safest environments. They want the best, housing. But they don't care about their children's akhirah. They don't care about their children's afterlife. Isn't that kind of contradictory? They really want them to live safe and happy lives, but when it comes to religion, when it comes to Islam, they don't teach them. They don't teach their kids what is haram, what is sinful. I mean, parents are supposed to keep a watch on their kids, right? And these Muslim parents that I'm talking about, they often do. They often keep a watch on what their kids are watching on TV. They keep a watch on them, but for some reason, when it comes to religion, they check out. When it comes to Islam, they check out. They don't teach their kids Islam. They don't care if their kids follow Islam. It's sad how many of these Muslim parents, they don't care about the westernized lifestyle that their kids are living, and openly. I'm sick that there are so many elders in my community, so many aunts and uncles in my community whom I shook hands with regularly, whom I hugged when I was little, whom I looked up to. These aunties and uncles, they've always been good to my family, but many of them fail to teach their kids Islam. I see this. I see many of these aunties and uncles. I know their kids. I know through school. I saw many of them at school. I see many of them through social media. I see many of them through work. And, they, when it comes to Islam, it's just not in them. They live very openly sinful lifestyles, all the sins that I mentioned already earlier in the beginning of this video. And these kids have no problem doing it, and these parents have no problem at all that their kids are doing them. If you're a Muslim parent like this, why don't you might as well go buy your son a pack of condoms. Why don't you go buy your daughter's birth control pills? Why would you even act surprised and shocked if you found out that your kids are having sex outside of marriage, when they're drinking alcohol, when they're going to mixed gender parties? Why would you act surprised when you didn't teach them that this is all wrong? It's awkward when our own parents will tell us to, they'll say, oh, look how good the kids of these parents are. Look how good they are. How come you can't be like them? I think we all get this from our parents. I got it. My sisters got it. The thing about our parents is that they don't see what these kids are doing. They don't see what the kids of their friends, of their family friends are doing. We do. We see it through school and work, and we see it through social media. Our parents don't see what they're posting on social media. I just don't get these Muslim parents in our communities who don't care about the spiritual well-being of their kids. It's awkward, um, to see these people, these aunties and uncles who are part of our own friend circle, of our family friend circle, you know, they don't seem, these aunties and uncles, these Muslim parents, and they don't seem to care what kinds of photos and videos that their children post on social media. They don't care about, what environment they're in, who they're hanging out with, what clothing they're wearing, the premarital relations that they're having, and so forth. It's just, for some reason, their brain stops working and they don't care what their kids are up to. As you get older, you become more self aware. You see, you understand, and you notice more. And I feel like, a lot of these elders in our community, they let us down. Obviously, when you're a kid, you don't see it, but when you grow up and you see, okay, the uncle that gave me an extra 20 on Eid, extra $20 on Eid, the one I really liked, the uncle, his son, his daughter is completely westernized. It comes as a shock. When you don't teach your kids Islam, they will grow up with a westernized culture. They'll grow up westernized, they'll have westernized friends, they'll act westernized, they'll behave and act and dress just like non-Muslims. Teaching kids Islam at a young age is very vital because as they get older, it's more difficult for them to understand what is right and what is wrong in Islam. They won't think that they're doing anything wrong when they're drinking alcohol or having boyfriends and girlfriends and wearing inappropriate clothes. If they're older and you're trying to tell them, hey, this is not right in religion, they won't get it. They won't understand. They'll be confused. That's why it's so important to teach Islam to kids, because it doesn't work when they're older. Sometimes these Muslim kids who are older, if you try to correct them, they'll be like, oh, you're being too religious. Oh, you're being just like Taliban and ISIS. Another issue with Muslim parents is that if you have too many kids, it means you can't control and manage them. When you have too many kids, okay, it's so hard to keep a check on them. It's hard enough to keep a check on kids if you only have one or two. But there's Muslim parents who have anywhere from like 7 to 12 children. These children, a lot of the times, they end up doing whatever they want to because they have no parental guidance. Because, as I said, it's downright impossible to control all of them, to manage all of them, to teach them all Islam. It's so difficult. It's so difficult to give them all guidance. Many times these kids who have so many siblings, they have no discipline installed in them. They don't have Islam and instilled into them. They have no supervision. They roam around on their own. And you know what happens? They either become bad Muslims, so they engage in the sins that I mentioned earlier, or they become flat out criminals. They join gangs to fulfill the missing part in their lives, which is supposed to be love and attention and Islam from their parents. My own high school, when I was in high school, it had Arab and Somali and Punjabi Sikh gangs. They all came from huge families, okay? And these gangs, they were violent. You don't want to cross them, okay? It's also common, to hear about these gangs of teen youth, of Arab and Somali and Afghan youth, Muslim youth, who come from huge families, so they join gangs. They commit crimes and clash with police. It's in the news sometimes. You hear it. And a lot of the times, these Muslim kids who have so many siblings, they usually, have a stay-at-home mother. So, the Salafis, they say, women need to stay at home and teach the kids Islam, and that's how they'll be, be good Muslims. Well, we're seeing here that it's not working. Okay. The solution is that both parents need to educate their kids on Islam, and both need to discipline them when necessary. Both parents could be working outside the home, or one parent could be working outside the home and one parent could be at home, or they both could be at home. It makes no difference what parents do, just as long as they teach their kids Islam at a young age, and keep an eye on them. Another set of misguided Muslim parents are those who act like their white Western parents. In other words, they'll tell their kids that they can do whatever they want to. So these are Muslim parents. They'll tell their kids they can do whatever they want to when they're 18 or off to college. When they're 18 or off to college, they can drink, smoke, have sex, wear inappropriate clothes, and so on. Obviously, this is not how you parent in Islam. Okay, obviously, when Muslim kids are older, you can't treat them as kids. I'll talk about this at the end of the video and how you're supposed to raise kids in Islam. But, you should still encourage them to remain on the right path. And this is after you raise them with Islam from a young age. Okay? I'll talk more about this later at the end of the video and how you're supposed to raise kids. And then, there's also Muslim parents who tell their daughters to wear hijab and their sons to memorize the Quran, but that's where it stops. I know Muslim kids like this. I knew them at school. They'll have a hijab on their head. They might have memorized the Quran. They might have had a beard. But that's where it stopped. And from this point forward, they acted very Western. And their parents didn't seem to care. These kids, the daughters have no idea why they wear hijab. And these sons have no idea why they have beards and why they memorize the Quran. Because when it comes to Islam, for these specific parents, this is all it is. There's nothing more. And obviously it has negative effects when the kids are literally acting westernized, very westernized. It's so sad how so many Muslim parents don't teach their kids the bare minimum of Islam, the absolute basic aspects, basic aspects that many non-Muslims can easily fulfill. These Muslim parents who don't teach the basic minimum requirements of Islam. It causes kids to, eventually become atheists and maybe reject religion because they don't see a point in it, because their parents didn't teach them at a young age. Parents are at fault for the misguidance of their children. Okay? Now notice that misguidance is not the same as sinning. Misguidance is different. Okay, because every Muslim sins. Misguidance is different, okay? Parents need to be blamed for this, and not the kids. Every time we hear about school shootings in the news, when a student goes and shoots up a school, notice how everyone always blames the parents. The parents could have had the best of character, but it doesn't matter. At this specific moment, where were you? Why didn't you keep a check on your kid? It's your responsibility to know what they're up to. In the exact same way, many Muslim parents need to be held accountable this way. When their kids are nowhere near Islam. Islam begins at home. Okay, it begins from birth. Parents are supposed to teach their kids Islam. Okay, so they're supposed to teach them what is haram. They're supposed to teach them important du'as for protection and for success. And they're supposed to do it, with love and compassion. Okay, it's sad how so many Muslim parents don't give this to their kids. There's some Muslim parents who think they can just send their kids to an Islamic school and where they memorize the Quran, and these Muslim parents think that makes them the best Muslim parents. These parents, sometimes they'll gloat, they'll brag that their children go to such an Islamic school. They don't seem to care about the spirituality of their kids, but just the overall image of them being at an Islamic school. By the way, also, I myself went part-time to an Islamic school, part-time. And I knew people there. And let me tell you, they acted just like how a non-Muslim kid would act in a public school. People often think that, oh, this person goes to Islamic school, oh, they're a good person. No, that's not the case. And, it's because these parents think just because you send your kids to Islamic school, everything is taken care of. They're wrong. They're supposed to teach Islam at a young age to their own kids. Okay? You can, if you do that, if you're a Muslim parent and you teach your kid Islam from a young age, it doesn't matter if you send them to Islamic school or a public school. You've done your job and it'll show in your kid. Your children will reflect it. Sometimes I don't get the Muslim parents who are shocked and disappointed when their children are westernized. These Muslim parents didn't keep a check on them. They didn't teach them Islam from a young age. They didn't care what they're up to. They were ignorant. And then now all of a sudden they act surprised and wondered where they went wrong. I read online, there was something along the lines of every child deserves parents, but at the same time, not every parent deserves children. And this is true for everyone. And yeah, many Muslim parents don't deserve children. They don't deserve children if the parents are going to be abusive and controlling. They don't deserve children if they control their daughter and restrict their daughter while their sons are doing whatever they feel like. They don't deserve children if they won't teach them Islam. You don't deserve children if you don't teach your kids Islam. To be honest, cucked is a good word to describe these parents. They're cuckolds. They're so cucked that they can't even teach their kids the basic things about Islam, basic haram things to avoid. They're cucks. They're cuckolds. They're so cucked that they couldn't teach their kids religion. Many times these parents that I mentioned, they will have regrets later on in life how they raised their kids. It'll eventually hit them when they see, their children being very westernized. These parents will feel it, they'll feel guilty. But it'll be way too late. And they'll spend the rest of their lives hating themselves. Or, if these Muslim parents, if they're still too concerned about their own status and image in the community, if they're too concerned about their own akhirah, their own spirituality, then, they won't have any regrets how they raised their kids. They'll just blame their own kids for being misguided. They won't accept responsibility, and they say there's nothing they could have done to bring them to the right path. A lot of the cases that I mentioned above, the parents are quite often dressed. I mentioned earlier that there's many religious Muslim parents who are dressed conservatively, who are religious, and but their kids are complete opposites. Sometimes they're just so far away from religion. And again, it's because these parents, they're too concerned about their own spirituality. They're too concerned about their own spiritual well-being. You can't teach Islam to a non-practicing or a secular or a whitewashed Muslim who is older. Okay? If you try and teach Islam to someone who's older, to a Muslim who's older, but they're non-practicing or liberal or secular, they will think that certain aspects of Islam are myths and not needed in the 21st century. This is how they'll think. Okay, they won't understand the concept of God, of prophets, of angels, of shaitan, of what is haram, and so forth. They won't get it. One other point I want to make before I quickly talk about how you should raise your kids in Islam. We shouldn't be surprised at irreligious offspring, at irreligious Muslim children, when one parent is non-Muslim. Okay? Usually it's when a Muslim man marries a non-Muslim woman in the West, and he always marries her out of lust, to fulfill his lustful desires. Okay? The children are never practicing Muslims. Never. There's so many famous non-practicing Muslim celebrities, politicians, journalists, athletes, actors, actresses. Many of them have a Muslim father and a non-Muslim mother. And, they themselves are not practicing. And I guarantee this, whenever you see a Muslim man who marries a non-Muslim woman, it's always due to lust, and the children are never Muslim. They're never practicing. I'll talk more about this in another video that I want to do about interfaith marriages and how they never work. Interfaith marriages never work. You can never have a successful Muslim family with successful Muslim children who are, dear to religion, dear to Islam, when you have a non-Muslim mother, a non-Muslim parent. I'll talk more about that in that video. So finally, how do you raise kids in Islam? So I myself am not married. I don't have children. But I am observant, okay? I observe other Muslims. I observe other Muslim kids. I observed them when I was in high school, when I was in university. I observed them at work. I observed them at through social media. I observe their parents, and you learn to realize a few things. You learn, you know, you can figure out on your own, okay, where the parent went wrong, where the Muslim parents went wrong. Okay, so from all that, I came to a couple of conclusions. So how do you raise your kids in Islam? So firstly, you educate them at a young age, as I said throughout this video. It doesn't work when they're older. When they're adults, okay, when you're a Muslim parent and you have kids and they become adults, you can't treat them like children, okay? You have to acknowledge that they're old enough to make their own decisions, okay? But at the same time, you should still encourage them and lead by example when they need it, okay? When you have kids when they're young, then you act as an authority figure, okay? Because kids respond to authority. This is a perfect time to teach them Islam. But when they're older, you can't act as an authority figure. You have to realize that your children are adults. Okay? You have to acknowledge that they're old enough, that they've been taught enough to make their own decisions. Okay? But again, of course, you still encourage them and lead by example when it's necessary. Okay, because even if your kids are misguided, when your older kids are misguided, they will eventually, sooner than later, come back to the right path. If you teach your kids Islam at a young age, if you act as an example when they're older, your kids, your adult kids, if they sin, okay, if they're sinning, they'll feel guilty about it. They'll know how to repent. They'll know how not to do it again. They won't be proud of what they did. And they'll realize this all on their own. Okay? They'll come back to the right path on their own. When you taught them Islam from a young age, and when your kids got older, you acted as an example. When you lead by example when your kids are older. When they're younger, obviously you're an authority figure, but when they're older, you lead by example, and you have to acknowledge that your kids are adults. With all this, yeah. So they'll if they sin, they'll feel guilty. They'll correct themselves. And finally, the last point on how to raise kids, you have to have trust in your kids. So if you educate them from a young age about Islam, you have to trust that they will make the right decisions. Even if they make the wrong decisions, you have to trust that they will acknowledge that they are wrong and that they will correct themselves. Okay? You have to trust that they will pass Islam on to their offspring, and you have to trust that they'll have a good Muslim spouse who will help them in this. Okay? So, that's all for now. I hope I made some convincing points here. So until next time.